Culturally relevant teaching philosophy. First off, I want to say that the definitions of key terms were taken from our class readings, thoughtcode.com, and Google. I used other resources because sometimes it was hard to find the definitions in the readings when they were not bolded. So I had to like scan every page, to try to find, and it was quite a few pages in our readings that took up time. So I just resorted to other resources. All right, so let's get started. In today's society, describing a group of people who share a community and a culture, with culture being defined as shared beliefs, values, and practices that participants must learn, we have a huge population of diverse classrooms. And with these types of classrooms, education has to do more than pass out content. It has to affirm, identify, and connect learning to real life situations that students face and equip students to stand up and challenge injustice. This is what I call teaching that makes a difference. Working in a diverse district and diverse school communities, I often see firsthand where students are asked to leave parts of themselves at the door before entering a classroom. This is not education. Depriving students of being their true and full selves is an example of schooling, known as a narrow, standardized, and often a disconnection from their lives. Education, on the other hand, is a freeing act. It welcomes students to come as they are, to bring their full selves into the learning process, as well as recognizing them as holders of cultural and social capital, meaning cultural knowledge that serves metaphorically as currency to help students navigate their culture and not just be recipients of it. As learned from our reading, culture is a broad concept and encompasses everything that is created by people. Teachers who have chosen sociocultural theory of learning as their theoretical framework see culture as having assets that can be built on in the learning process. Culturally relevant teaching, also known as CRT, can be defined as an approach to instruction found on the belief in education and value of social justice. CRT responds to the social-cultural context of students and seeks to integrate their cultural and social capital, as mentioned before, which includes students' backgrounds, experiences, expectations, family knowledge, family networks, and values. CRT also takes into consideration student behaviors, interactional patterns, and historical background according to Perusal's Cultural Relevant Teaching on page 80. My presentation is going to describe my culturally relevant teaching philosophy that is built on a three-part framework broken down by roots, resonance, and redemption. The teaching philosophy is centered around key sociological and educational theories from the course and paired with my personal experiences of being in schools and communities. First, I want to start with roots. Roots is the first core aspect of my teaching philosophy because culturally relevant teaching starts by understanding, recognizing, and affirming where students come from. This means their culture, ethnicity, which refers to a shared lifestyle informed by cultural, historical, religious, and/or national affiliations. Students' values that are defined by a culture standard for discerning what is good and just in society and are critical for transmitting and teaching a cultural belief. Teachers must also understand, recognize, and affirm a student's belief, cultural symbols, and even their language and ways of knowing. When referring to belief, we must understand that beliefs are the tenets or conventions that people hold to be true. Individuals in a society have specific beliefs, but they also share collective values. This principle relies on the concept of cultural relativism, which teaches us as teachers to understand students' culture on their own terms and not through the lens of what is known as ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism, as sociologist William Graham Sumner describes the term, involves a belief or attitude that one's own culture is better than all others. We don't like to admit it, but it is a reality that schooling tends to favor white, middle class norms and gives labels to anything else as being subpar. Too many times, students of different cultures are not reflected in the curriculum or classroom practices, and this can and does contribute to symbolic violence, meaning the internalization of inferiority. That's a mouthful. Students of various cultures that are anything but white are feeling less than in a room full of their peers. To me, this is simply not acceptable. As an educator, I seek to try to change this and not let it be the norm, quote unquote, in my classroom. As our class content states, teaching the whole student means to know the whole person, including his or her cultural background and identity. There are a few ways that I would enact the roots belief into my classroom. First, in order to get a foundational understanding of who everyone is, I would create an assignment of family storytelling. I would invite families to quote unquote come in to the classroom via video, audio message, or artifact to tell a story about something that is important and matters to them. This could be anything from a migration story to a recipe, a tradition, or even a challenge they have overcome. In our coursework, we learned about the Funds of Knowledge program, where teachers believe in incorporating parents in the learning process. That is where I would like the parents of my students to come in to my classroom with this particular assignment. Students and adults speak on their topic, opening the door for other students in the classroom to learn of various backgrounds, learn of traditions, and even struggle or resilience. Doing this type of assignment not only makes everyone feel accepted, but it honors diverse backgrounds and challenges the hidden curriculum that says only certain stories matter. Hidden curriculums refers to a concept that describes the often unarticulated and unknowledged things students are taught in school, and that may affect their learning experiences. These are often unspoken and implied lessons unrelated to the academic courses they're taking, things learned from simply being in school. Hidden curriculum is an important issue in the sociological study of how students can generate social inequity, unlike my assignment of formal curriculum. Formal curriculums consist of courses, lessons, and learning activities that students participate in, just like the one that I created for them to do. The foundations of the formal curriculum are based on publicly valued intellectual, social, cultural, political, and economic funds of knowledge, as mentioned before. Too often, schools use a one size fits all approach that prioritizes dominant norms and erases diverse cultural backgrounds. Which brings me to my next idea. I would also like to celebrate holidays around the world. Rather than centering only on US holidays, such as Thanksgiving and Christmas, I would like to create a broad space, not a broad, a board space throughout the year to learn about and honor celebrations from different cultures, such as Diwali, Lunar New Year, Hanukkah, and so forth. I would take the time to let the student or students the holiday applies to tell the class a little bit about it and celebrate these holidays with stories, food, art, or even music. By allowing students to share, I am validating them and framing their knowledge as expertise rather than otherness. Affirming identity fosters student confidence and builds the cultural capital needed for academic and personal. I would also address the class by presenting these holidays as not these holidays not as quote different from ours or exotic, but as meaningful in its own right. The second core aspect is resonance. Students must be able to connect their learning to lived realities, especially in elementary school. I can't count the number of times that I use Takis to make math make sense. If learning doesn't connect, it becomes what Paulo Freire, I think that's how you pronounce his name, calls banking education, quote unquote, where information is deposited into passive minds. This is another difference between schooling and education. When education is dialogic, informal, and formal, it empowers students to question the world, literally. Informal education means more of unstructured teaching that occurs naturally in daily life through personal experiences, interactions, and observations. Whereas formal education is a structured way of learning that is typically found within schools. This type of education follows a detailed plan of what students must learn and is usually delivered to them by trained educators. With the aspect of resonance, I apply intersectionality to my teaching curriculum. Being able to understand how different identities like race, class, gender, and language will overlap in the classroom helps to shape students' experience. As a teacher, if you don't understand how important intersectionality is, the best well planned and well meaning lessons can fall flat. We must also face the fact that challenges with racial fallacies, especially individualistic and ahistoric, will need to be addressed. In individualistic fallacy, racism is perceived to be the thing that only racist, quote unquote, people are capable of, thus dividing the world into two categories: those who are racist and those who are not. This fallacy also assumes that racism is equated with its intention. This type of racism tends to put the weight of racism on individuals while ignoring its systemic roots. As for a historical fallacy, it regards history as irrelevant to today's issues. This type of racism claims that history, specifically the history in which the U.S. withheld basic human rights from black people, is far removed from those currently alive that it does not affect us today. This fallacy ignores the fact that the present has built upon the past and that the reparations of such oppression have consequences that are passed on through generations. I bring racial fallacies up because honestly, I never thought as an elementary teacher I would watch racism play out in my classroom, but it did. I have witnessed students be offended by both types of racism. And in that moment, I had to not only understand their very valid feelings, but also resonate with them and use it as a teaching moment. I would not put the student or students on the spot, but to teach the issue as a general concern, and an unacceptable behavior for my classroom and in life in general. Now, let's be honest. We all know that children are not born racist or with the knowledge of history. It's taught, but what is taught at home needs to stay at home when it involves displaying hate towards others for whatever reason. And unfortunately, a lot of our youth face racism, bullying, and made to feel less than on a daily basis. In my classroom, I want students to know uh, I want students to know that they are loved, seen, and heard no matter what. So my idea for resonating education to the young lives of my kiddos would be a quote, "Who am I?" unquote identity book, a class playlist, or renamed Soundtrack of Us, and maybe a class constitution with community norms. The Who Am I book helps students see themselves reflected in the curriculum. Each student creates a book with pages like my name story, my family, being chosen, blood or both, what makes me smile, my culture, as in food, tradition, music, clothing, etc., my language or languages, and things that I am good at. Doing this type of activity not only gets students to open up, but it centers students' lived experiences, not just academic content. It allows for differentiation. Students can draw, write, or dictate. The second idea of a soundtrack of us is one that I actually did for my second grade class. It was made to allow them to work quietly and independently in a calm, lights off or turned down room. It was a whole vibe. They loved it. It builds classroom community through culture and music. Each student gets to share a song that is school friendly, of course, and says why it is important to them and what the song reminds them of. The kids get excited once the playlist is created. It turns the classroom into a shared cultural space, and everyone contributes to something that matters. The last idea is one that I actually am thinking of doing this year with my first grade class, which is a class constitution with community norms. This relinquishes ownership of the classroom to an extent. Instead of rules, we will co create a class constitution. We ask questions like, how do we want to treat each other? What helps us feel safe and brave? What should we do when we see someone is hurt? Doing this time of doing this time of questions being asked, I'm sorry, I worded that crazy. um, I would also make sure the kids are aware of fairness, made aware that fairness must also come into play. Asking questions like, is everyone in our school treated the same? Have you Ever seen someone get in trouble faster than someone else for the same exact thing? Does this also happen outside of school? After we have the questions answered, um, after we have the questions and answers, that's what it is, I will turn the responses into a poster and we can revisit it at any time. Once the Constitution is created, I will guide them into a discussion about how it's made for everyone to follow. I will let them know that sometimes rules are made or enforced unfairly, not just in our class, but in bigger places like other schools, such as colleges and universities, jobs, or even courts. This is called institutional racism, meaning people get treated differently just because of who they are, and that is not right. We will follow our Constitution fairly for everyone in the classroom, no matter the race, gender, age, etc. By discussing this fairness talk, I am helping kids recognize injustice in ways that connect to their everyday lives, like classroom discipline, and scaling it up gently to the systemic level. This will resonate with the students because they will also recognize that their voices, while little, can still shape how school feels, and that helps to build trust, especially for kids who may not always feel seen and who have experienced institutional racism. Overall, learning resonates when students see how power and policy shape their lives. It also builds social capital, critical thinking, and agency. The third pillar is redemption. Redemption means equipping students to challenge injustice and reclaim power. It is a commitment to confronting social inequity and stratification in schools. Social inequity in schools refers to the disparities in access to quality education based on various social factors, including socioeconomic status, race, and geographic location. While social stratification refers to the way society categorizes individuals into different layers or strata based on various factors such as wealth, income, occupation, education, and power. One such perspective is critical pedagogy, which was developed by Brazilian educator Paulo, Paulo Freire. I think I'm pronouncing his name right. Critical pedagogy focuses on empowering students to critically engage with the world around them and challenge the existing power structures. It advocates for an education that goes beyond routine learning and encourages students to question authority, examine societal inequities, and participate in social change. Too often, schooling becomes a sorting mechanism that reproduces hierarchy through standardized testing, as we all know, AP and honor tracking, and classroom discipline practices. By encouraging students to think critically about social issues such as inequity, race, class, and class, educators can help dismantle the system of oppression that perpetuates social stratification. I believe it is our job as educators to expose these structures and to support our students in reclaiming power. Power of that's symbolic, economic, social, and political. By exposing these structures and standing up against inequality, we disrupt hegemony, meaning the dominance of a single worldview, and we promote alternative narratives that empower marginalized voices. To enact this aspect in class, I would challenge students to pick a policy or practice that they would like to challenge in order to see change. From there, they are to research, collect data, such as surveying their peers, and then writing up a persuasive letter or letters, if they want to do it per student, to school leadership. And then a public presentation to the school board advocating for equality-based policy or practice changes, which I think would be a fantastic project. This gives them authentic means while teaching skills in research, writing, and public speaking. As stated before, culturally relevant teaching should not only affirm students, but also empower them. Redemption turns learning into action. So, for my conclusion, current cultural relevance is important with teaching in today's diverse classrooms and communities because in today's classrooms, we simply cannot afford colorblind or culture blind teaching. Culturally relevant teaching addresses the reality that students enter our rooms shaped by structures of power. It invites students to bring their full selves and prepares them to not only succeed in the world, but to change it. Our classrooms are small communities of the larger society. If we want justice outside of them, we have to model justice within them. My framework of roots, resonance, and redemption meets these needs by one, affirming students' identities, and their cultural worth. Two, connecting learning to their everyday lived experiences. And three, empowering students to challenge inequities. In doing so, I am not just teaching, no, in doing so, I aim to not just teach content, but to teach each student that they matter, their stories matter, and their futures are definitely worth fighting for. That concludes my presentation. However, I want to say that this has been great to read, different aspects, different key terms, learning different and new things. This has been my first year teaching, and it was great. Of course, there, excuse me, I had to take a drink. My throat's dry. There were, issues of like I said, racism. I had a child that I couldn't believe how much racism for verbiage, I should say, came out of her mouth every day. And she's 7. So just looking at things like that and and digging into these readings and trying to understand different cultures and everything, I try to make everyone in my classroom feel welcomed, feel like they can trust Miss CJ, they can come to me with anything. Yes, I am going to get on you when you are out of line, but because I get on you does not mean that I don't love you. I tell my students I love them, and I do that because I may be the only person in their lives to say that to them. I may be the only person in their lives to hug them, to make sure their shoes tied, to make sure, the things that they're coming to school to do gets done and then some. We as educators definitely have to stop and recognize the life. Life. Every kid is coming in with a story. Every kid is coming in with some kind of weight that they are carrying. And if you can be that one person just for a moment, and the day, the time, the 7 hours that we have them, if you can be that one person that shows them the attention, gives them the time, talks to them, laughs with them, smiles with them, just gives them the world and makes them feel special while they are there. That's what education is about. It bothers me sometimes that we have to follow just these strict curriculum. You know, it's this time we do this time we do that, this time we do that. I would like to have a curriculum where us as teachers, we have the IM and the EL there, yes, to teach it, but to teach it in our own way. And that's what I try to do, especially with math. You know, I use Takis. My students were just not getting the addition, and I threw a bunch of Takis on the table and said, count out 4 Takis. Count out 6 Takis and put them in another pile. Now, add all the Takis that are on the desk together. What do you get? And they could relate to that, and then they got to eat the Takis, of course. So that attention was there. But just doing things like that to make learning fun. Um, we as people, and not even just the kids, are carrying around a lot. You know, we stress about things, we worry about things. Kids should not have the stressors and the worries that they do these day and age, um, but they do, and it's really sad. So, like I said, if you could just be that shining light for them, that's to me is what being an educator is all about. Teaching them, loving them, and letting them know that they matter. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it.